You're recording.
All righty, great. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 2nd, 2021 Bridgewater Town Council meeting to order. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. All righty, I do, just to remind everyone that the meeting is being aired live and recorded. I do have some condolences to pass along. First one, condolences to the family of William Scott Wright upon his passing on January 18th, 2021. Mr. Wright served in the United States Air Force during the Vietnam War. Also, condolences forwarded to the family of Michael J. Palindro on his passing on January 2nd, 2021. Mr. Palindro served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. Also like to pass on condolences to the family of Robert I. Cosgrove upon his passing on January 11th, 2021. Mr. Cosgrove served in the United States Air Force during the Korean War. I'd like to pass on condolences to the family of Richard D. Long upon his passing on January 18th, 2021. Mr. Long served in the United States Army in the Republic of Korea during the Korean War. I'd like to have a moment of silence for those veterans and any other veterans and first responders who have passed. Thank you. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, the meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There will be no in-person attendance permitted. Citizens who wish to tune in to the meeting may do so via Facebook Live. Okay, moving on, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the January 19th, 2021 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Nothing.
Mr. Chase,
No, nothing.
any other counselors? This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch. Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Alrighty, we do not have any announcements. Proclamations, we'll move on to Citizens Open Forum. The Bridgewater Town Council encourages citizens to attend its meetings and welcome their views on issues of importance. A Citizens Open Forum will be placed on each council agenda, and citizen comment period will be included at the end of each agenda. Anyone may comment at this time for up to 3 minutes. Comments should be made in a respectful manner and not cast aspersions on individual council members or the council as a whole. The president shall have the discretion to declare any question or comment duplicative, Such a declaration may be overruled with 2/3 vote of the council. Non-residents may speak only with the approval of a vote of the council. Also, as a reminder, before speaking, please state your name and your street for the record. Is there anyone that'd like to speak for Citizens Open Forum? I see Ms. Neary.
Good evening. Pat Neary, Lakeside Drive. I'm here this evening to register my opposition to having Councillor Wood's proposal to place a marijuana question on our spring voting ballot. We're all concerned about financing the necessities in our town. However, encouraging the sale of drugs is not one we should promote. Councillor Wood falsely stated that there has been a clear shift of public support for adult use of recreational marijuana. That is not true. Studies would show that if you'd like me to provide them. Nothing good comes from selling more drugs, and the negative consequences have been shown in studies. Only the marijuana industry benefits. I know that some of you have seen the ad by ACS, which falsely advertises that they sell to qualified patients holding a mass patient registration card or adults 21 years of age. That statement isn't even legal. If our medical facilities can't be responsible, will a pot shop? And who monitors that in our town? Our community has already voted on whether to have pot shops in town, and they voted no. Please don't encourage any steps, such as a ballot question, that may lead to more drugs in our town. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else like to speak during Citizens Open Forum? Ms. Robinson, I see your hand up.
Hi there. Thank you, President George. Good evening. My name is Susie Robinson. I'm a resident on Holly Lane in Bridgewater. I would like to add on to the opposition of putting that question out on the April ballot. I think that, as I've stated in previous conversation, I just would like to quickly reiterate that there does not appear to be full discussion from this group or others around looking at all the aspects of the business case around this kind of a proposal long-term for the health impacts, the detrimental impacts, especially to young people, especially teenagers. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about crime, but it's more about long-term health impacts. So I would urge the council to focus on more pressing and urgent matters that truly have hopefully more positive gain for the benefit of the whole community. My second comment I just wanted to share, actually just coming off of the joint subcommittee budget meeting prior to this. I apologize. I realized I think I forgot it was in the wrong forum, but I did want to address the whole town council that there has been several conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion. There has been some understanding that the district will be looking to include a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator for one of its 12 proposed roles needed, the positions needed in the next fiscal budget. I am just asking the council to help set a great example for our community to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, support those kind of efforts, advocate. We can't necessarily, we may not be able to necessarily tell the district what they do with those funds, but I think that as leaders of our community, showing that you're supportive of those kind of efforts could go a very long way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I see a hand up for a phone number that ends in 098. Could you please identify yourself with your name and your street address, please?
It's Jen. Mr. George, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, sorry. It's Jennifer Smith, Boxwood Lane. I just want to voice my opposition again to Bill Wood's order fiscal year 21-029, place an advisory question on the April 24th, 2021 town election. Again, the residents have already spoken on this issue that was dragged out for over a year, and they did not want pot shops in this town. And it's concerning that he continues to go to bat for these million-dollar drug companies while the taxpaying residents would have to deal with the ramifications of his actions. Having pot shops in town will not make Bridgewater a more desirable place to live, period. It's not good for kids, it's not good for families, and it's not safe. I don't know if it's about winning or what this is so important to him, but this is a serious matter. Just a few months ago, a couple in Natick was hit by an alleged teen driver high on marijuana. Well, the 4 high school students from Stoughton who were killed while one was under the influence of pot when he crashed his car in East Bridgewater. A crash that killed 4 young kids that day, and that could have killed other innocent people that day in East Bridgewater while they were driving high. I'm asking this council to please not support this order. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone, so Mr. Ivaldi?
Good evening. Thanks, Council, for allowing us to speak tonight. Ed Ivaldi, Boxwood Lane. I understand the desire of the ballot advisory question is to assess the current opinion of residents in town regarding retail marijuana sales. I have 3 related comments. The explanation listed in the ordinance says that public support has significantly changed on this issue. Was the council provided with any studies or materials that reflect this, or is this simply Mr. Wood's opinion? Secondly, the fact is there are many recently released studies, such as the National Survey on Drug Use and the Monitoring the Future survey, that provide lots of data that I wonder if you or the general public is aware of. If the council does approve this ballot question, I suggest sharing some of these studies with the public before April, since I would assume that most citizens don't have the time or desire to do the research on their own. Posting links on the town website or using social media could be a way to keep the public informed about this controversial topic. Since I missed the first meeting when this was introduced, I'm still not clear on how this would benefit the town besides some additional revenue. If the primary motive for bringing this up again is money, then let's look at a comprehensive plan to increase business in general. Let's face it, this is a business that will introduce risks to our town, risks that will impact the youth and future generations of Bridgewater residents. According to data from the National Survey on Drug Use, daily marijuana use has increased among high school seniors, while daily use among 8th graders remains 50% higher than it was just 2 years ago. In addition, adolescents aged 12 to 17 using marijuana in the past year significantly increased versus last year in the legalized states of Nevada, Oregon, and California. So is this what we want to see in our town? As the people's representatives, the council certainly needs to understand the will of the people and to legislate accordingly. But the council is also responsible to ensure the well-being of every citizen. That means keeping the environment within town safe, healthy, and viable for the future. That said, I ask that you consider opposing this ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hanson, I see your hand up.
Good evening, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street, Bridgewater. I did send a letter to the town council. I don't know if it's all right if I can read what I wrote. I do agree with everybody that's spoken so far. And I just wanted to say that while I realize this is not an actual vote to approve or allow it in Bridgewater, I have concerns about how this question will be presented to voters. As I said at the last town council meeting, I feel that the question needs to have more information to the voters. What will the town council do with this information, and why are they asking this question? The town did vote against legalizing recreational marijuana back in, I think it was 2016, and came out in strong opposition to having retail in our town 2 years ago. The only reason that this is being presented to us now is to say about having, we're going to get huge tax dollars if we could possibly get it. That's getting old. That reason for having it is getting old. It's not a good enough reason when you need to take everything into consideration. And there's no guarantee that we'll receive that amount in tax revenue that's being presented to us. One will point out that the question is not actually about retail, allowing retail in town, but just taking a poll on what voters would want. But I'm not so naive to not think that despite the outcome, the push to allow it will continue by certain members or members of the town council. There are so many reasons to not have it in our town, but the argument is not about that as much as this continued push to have it in our town. 2 years have passed, so it's brought up again. I think this town needs to concentrate on other matters other than drudging this up again. as Ms. Loach said at the last meeting, there's much more important things for this town to be focusing on at this time. I will not understand why this order has to be debated at this time, taking time away from more important matters, and what is the rush? I obviously feel that recreational marijuana doesn't belong in our town, and I'm very tired of this battle and the carrot being dangled in front of voters on how much money we'll get. That should not be the only consideration. And it's not what I want to have money from to pay for things in our town. How about promoting other businesses that everyone can benefit from? Pot is not a business that the majority of the town can or will use. Stop spending time on this and move on to better important things. And as Mrs. Neary had said, I also noticed that the discrepancy in the advertisement of the medical marijuana included adults over 21. That's not true. You have to have a prescription or a card. So if that's not being monitored properly, how can we guarantee anything else will be? But I just implore you to not even allow this ballot question to get on, on the ballot. And if it does, it has to be really presented carefully so people know exactly what's intended. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. All right, I have a phone number that ends in 912. Could you please state your name and your street for the record?
Hi, Mr. George. It's Taylor Sullivan, 250 Norland Park.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So first off, I just kind of wanted to, go off on what Mrs. Hanson had said. Basically, Mr. Wood's non-binding marijuana question, in my opinion, is just a ploy to come back to the council and try to convince the council that the residents of Bridgewater want retail marijuana in town. We've made it clear several times we do not want retail marijuana in our town. And above that, Theory and ACS, of course, if they get wind, which I'm sure they already know, that such a question potentially would be on a ballot, they're going to hire a team of people to basically get voters to the ballot, to have them vote on this, to try to skew the vote, to make it seem, like it's something that the residents want. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, just very simple, more drugs in your town equals more drug use. So this is a very serious matter. And, I get really upset when I hear that Mr. Wood is bringing it up again. He almost does so in a sort of jokingly fashion, but I would ask Mr. Wood to do some research, reach out to families that have family members that suffer from addiction, and take a look at the families and the lives that it destroys. It doesn't just destroy the person that has the addiction, but it destroys families. So I, quite frankly, am very angered that this keeps being brought up. And just, again, it destroys brains, it destroys family, it destroys youth. There's no positive to having more drugs in a town. And I'm sorry, any money that comes from that is dirty money. And I wouldn't want to live in a town that wants to get money in such a manner of selling drugs to the youth. So I just hope that all of the counselors that voted against this in the past and stuck up for what's right, I hope that you all have the courage to do that again tonight and really put this to rest. There's so many more things, like Ms. Loesch said, we could be talking about, and positive things, and we can find a more positive way to bring money to a town than selling drugs. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? And I don't see anyone, do you?
No,
Okay.
I do not.
Moving on to appointments, Disabilities Commission. Karen Acher, I believe. I'll entertain a motion to approve the appointment.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Okay. Mr. Fitzgibbons, any questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Souza?
No, not at this time.
Any other counselors? Mr. Dutton, anything to add? I probably should ask you first, but my apologies.
I have nothing to add, Mr. President. I think this particular candidate is an exceptional fit for disability, so I encourage the council ratification.
I will second that. Tremendous fit, actually. Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch, Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase, Mr. Chase,
You're on mute, Mr. Chase.
Yes, please.
thank you. Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, second appointment is for the Conan Trust, Michael Levy reappointment. Mr. Dutton, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. President. Mike Levy has represented the Kona Trust for approximately 5 years and done a fine job, so I encourage reappointment.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Fitzgibbons, any questions?
Nothing. Mr. Levy is a great public servant to the town for many years, as is his brother and his father.
Mr. Gallagher,
No, nothing.
any other counselors? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood, Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Thank you. 9 in favor, none against.
All righty, moving on. We do not have any hearings. We do not have any licensed transactions, presentations, Park and Recreation Commission update. I see Mr. Simons on the call. Mr. Simons, Mr. Dutton, the floor is yours.
I will thank you, Mr. President. I will turn it over to Mr. Simons, our Parks and Rec Superintendent, who can guide you through the activities.
That's me. Okay. I guess basically what we can do is go through what's transpired in the past year as far as due to the COVID, we had quite a, I should say, quietness down at Legion Field for a while. Most of the actual leagues, be it Little League or youth football, were fairly quiet until later on in the fall when certain things were able to be handled within the leagues. We were able to get done a lot of projects. I've been working with the finance department for several years now on creating a capital budget, a capital plan for many different things. Unfortunately, COVID put a squash on it. So we've backed off, but we still have some projects that have been done. I don't know if you have the capital plan in front of you. If you don't, I can go through quickly. We received capital funding from community preservation for the lighting of the 2 Little League fields, which had been done under budget. That is complete. We went to them last year and received money for 2 new backstops and some other fencing that needed repair at Legion Field. And those projects had been completed. There's one section of fencing being installed this week, weather permitting, at the Cottage Street Playground. That's the last portion of the funding from CPC. We had a couple other items on there that have a high priority. One of them is to do some paving at Marathon Park. Guidances that we've been dealing with. Hopefully we'll be able to get that done in the spring. The highway department helping out and coming up with some funds to handle that area. I think that's important. It's a great playground, and the parking lot would be pretty much right in front of the main gate to have 2 handicap parking, 1 on each side, basically, where it ties right into the concrete that goes in and around the playgrounds. the biggest project that we have going on right now that I've been dealing with for about the past summer, the new pickleball courts that are going to happen down at the senior center. We've completed 99% of the grading. We did a lot of handwork in there, preparing the site. We're in the process of putting an application together to go to reservation, requesting some funds. Mr. Dutton could alleviate that you later on a different phase, a couple of different phases for that whole project down there at the senior center. But we've both agreed that it's very important that we get this up and running. There's going to be 6 courts. Like I said, it's all ready to go. We've changed our minds on the lighting. We originally were going to consider lighting it, but I think due to budget constraints and the fact that we really don't need to have lighting for the pickleball courts. I've looked into other towns, and I think the money is better spent towards the grounds themselves, whether it be via a shelter area where you can put a couple of picnic tables, things like that around the premises, rather than spend 10, 20,000 on lighting. But it will be completely fenced in. I've got quotes on the fencing and the actual painting of the courts. I have, through the highway department, a plan to meet the paving contractor that won the bid for the town to come out so that come springtime, we're ready to go and we can get this thing down and operating hopefully by summertime. I think it's well received from the people that have contacted me, and I think it could be a really good project, not just for the seniors, but people coming into the senior center that with nothing else there for physical activity, they might be able to partake in this growing sport. Several towns around here in the South Shore have it, as well as the Cape, and as well as all over the country. It's a great sport, really. And you don't have to run. You can do a lot of things that, depending on what kind of shape you're in, and if you can move a little bit, that's all that it requires, really. I'm quite sure people that play this sport are going to be angry with me by saying you don't have to do much, but I think it's a really good. It can be kept watch on, and hopefully not get bikes and skateboards and things like that. So. We're pretty excited about that, and we'll be coming to community preservation in a short while, probably in February or the end of February, with an application with all that necessary information, and we're hoping that they're going to be in favor of that. I suppose it wouldn't hurt if you people on the town council would like to throw a letter in there. That'd be great, although you probably can't because you got to vote on it. So. Whatever works, and we're going to try to get people to support us, and hopefully it'll be a good project. As far as the golf course, although this is Park and Rec, although the Park and Rec does oversee the golf course, I'm not going to get too much into that. But we had up there, we followed, strictly followed the protocols, and we had a great year as far as rounds are played. You lose revenue on certain things because carts weren't available for a long time, and then one person. So I think the guys and the people up there have performed admirably, and they've done a great job in keeping the course in great shape. And it is still in good shape all through the winter. And when it's good weather and we don't have snow on the ground, people are still playing. So I do want to let you people know that the finance department, the finance director, we work closely in hand, and we're creating this. And I know in the past, recreation always, seems to be lower on the totem pole, and rightly so in some cases. For my background, I prefer to get more money and get more capital funds and all this stuff, but we are working together, and the powers that be realize that there are some things that need to be done. and are working towards that. And I have nothing but thanks to Tony Salmonte and all the women in the finance department that work close in hand with both the golf course and recreation. That's pretty much, unless people have certain questions they'd like to ask me.
I see, excuse me. Councilor Rushton, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd just say, Charlie, thank you for your many, many years of service to the town of Bridgewater and the Rec Commission. Having been a football coach, soccer coach, and everything else, you've done an incredible job. I just had two follow-ups. One was pre-COVID with Marathon Park, and to the generosity of the Oliari family donating all of that equipment out there and what I believed was a fund to maintain the equipment. The last I knew that the company had gone out of business and a lot of the younger equipment, was inoperable. Is there a plan, or if we found a new vendor, is that situation, do we have a plan to replace equipment when it becomes too dangerous and take it offline and get it quickly replaced?
Yes, to answer that, we've had meetings with Mr. Oliari's representative, who in turn had a new contractor. And what you say about the previous company is correct. We did meet with that contractor. They did give us a quote, and we're in the process of working with that through the capital plan. Mr. Dutton is aware of it, and so isn't Finance Director Solmonte. So it's quite a lot of money, and we have to determine, just for that one section and fixing a couple other little areas, you're probably talking 75 to 100 grand between replacing that one section on the right-hand side when you first go in, and a few other things, not just buying the equipment, but performing labor to get rid of. In order to do anything like that and replace equipment, you have to take everything out, which means whatever is underneath the soil, such as footings that were put in for that piece of equipment. It's not like you could use the footings and pre-drill something and put in the new stuff. You'd have to totally get that out. I'm not saying it can't be done. We certainly can do it. Whether we have to go outside to get some equipment, but it definitely needs to be done. And in my opinion, it's a high priority. It is a wonderful place. I know in the beginning, we had some issues maintaining it, and we're trying to maintain it better. I'd say we're down there at least 3 times a week in really good weather. And we're working towards having a managing a budget item every year to put towards what they call engineered wood fiber on the base of the playground, to keep that up, to do different things. But it takes money. And believe it or not, a load of stuff is probably $2,500 a pop. And it takes quite to raise that up a couple inches, that whole playground. And hopefully we'll get an answer this year in the spring, hopefully.
Thanks, Charlie. And just one quick follow-up. I was just wondering, from the Rec Commission, you guys had any initial conversations about Jenny Leonard Park? And I know that the contractor through the planning board was going to open up some access to that area. Are there any future plans being discussed about building a park on that side of town and revitalizing what we had out there?
I want to go back a few years ago. I believe it was a meeting that took place over in the building across the street, in the Memorial Building. And at the time, there was a proposal to come forward with a developer in that area. I believe it was the Latolas that wanted to perform some work and build some houses in there. And they would look into doing some maintenance on that area and getting it ready for a playground. That, I don't know if that property has since been sold to another developer, but nothing has come forward to me or the Rec Commission to move forward. The plan, the idea was good for the people in that neighborhood where all those homes are being built. And we had some people that were considering donating their time and material. So I can't honestly tell you where it stands right now, but I think it would be a good thing. But as you saw, as far as Mr. Oliari was concerned, he spent about over $400,000 at Marathon Park. So to do something would take an awful lot of money to do it the correct way and meet all the ADA requirements and that. So I don't know where it stands right now, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Columbotus, then Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Thank you, Mr. President. Charlie, you've talked a lot about the more recreation side of the Parks and Recreation Department. So I'm kind of to follow up on Mr. Rushton's question. Have you looked into the town's the parks where passive recreation would be more common to be practiced? Jenny Lind, Styles and Hart, I guess, were wondering what new activity you've taken place on some of the parks, that places where people might just go for a walk or have a picnic or stuff like that.
Yeah, I honestly think with this COVID, this really put a blow to or just kind of slowed down a lot of the progress that was being made on that kind of stuff. We before COVID hit in the fall, we had gone down and cleaned out an area behind where the old TV station is down on Spring Street.
Yeah.
Out and back, we cleared. We were going to start working on that. I know there was activity towards retaining I guess the title would have been a park steward. I was going to work under the rec commission and try to accomplish those things. So it's a matter of, from my personal point of view, from my end, there would need to be some labor involved, additional labor. There'd need to be another vehicle for our usage. That's in the capital plan. A lot of those things, when you open and you actually maintain those parks, you have to go down there every day or every other day and see what kind of trash you have. And that takes labor and manpower. And this has all been discussed. And I think COVID really put a halt to a lot of different things that we were planning on doing. And not just me or we, meaning the rec commission, but Mr. Dutton and other people involved.
Yeah. I just encourage you to kind of increase that emphasis on some of the parks. I've been going out to the old Latola place, the Wildlands Trust Great River Preserve, and I've seen a whole lot more families, people out walking, because that's something where even with COVID, you can avoid contact with other people just to go for a walk out in the woods or something. And it seems like there's been increased demand for that sort of activity. So I would urge you to kind of pay attention to that. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Simons, thank you for coming, first of all. And thank you also for what I know you've done over the years and getting donations in kind to the town and doing things for about 10 cents on the dollar a lot of times.
Jesus, sounds like you guys want me to retire.
I appreciate that. No, I don't want you to retire at all. If you can get down to 5 cents on the dollar, it would be even better. But no, I do, and I do appreciate you're looking at the budget in both ways and saying, at the pickleball court, for example, whether the lights would be more valuable than other structures in there, and making a determination saying, yeah, that we could do this, but we'd rather do that. And I trust your judgment on that. I trust the rec commission's judgment on that. One question I have about the pickleball courts is, are they completely insulated from whatever's going on with the Mitchell School, that you're not going to have a problem going on there?
Yeah, actually, when we originally had come up with the concept of where we were going to put these courts, we've actually, since that time, when I met with Mr. Dutton early in the spring, and what I wanted to do there, we changed our mind and moved. We're having 6 courts. I don't know if you know where that's going. Eventually, when I get through this whole presentation, with the pickleball going to CPC. We'll have pictures and design of where it is, but originally they were going to be side by side going all the way down. So it'd be 2, 2, and 2. Now we've actually moved it down. So there'll be 2 courts and then 2 and then 4. 2 and then 4 going the long way along the woods. So we've taken into consideration, because I met with the highway department and we saw the design of the road coming in for the school buses. And so they would have probably been, if we kept the original design, probably within 15 to 20 feet of that road. So we felt it better that we move it. So we have, and it'll be out of the way plenty. And since I want to say it was 3 weeks ago, Mr. Dutton and I met, and we talked about a couple other areas that were on the plans that show, particularly where the road is going to enter the senior center. And we had some discussions, and I'm quite sure that'll take place with the proper authorities with the road. And then in the future, what he wants to do, what his plan is to do around the back of the senior center, with either some outside bathrooms or a shelter area and things like that. So we feel that the way they're going to be designed now, that there shouldn't be any interference, or it'll alleviate any potential interference with the buses going through there.
Great, thank you. And really, this one's not for you, Mr. Simons, but it's really for the town manager and the town council to think about. But we did hear you talk about how much we have to consider when we have a new facility, Marathon Park, if we reopen Jenny Leonard Park, et cetera, what that means to you as far as maintenance and manpower and going there every other day to check on the trash, et cetera. And so I'd just like to make sure that the town manager and we as a town council make sure we think about those things as we bring other projects online. What does this actually mean? Not only to do it, because to do it is sometimes very easy with a gift, a very generous gift from a family or a foundation or whatever. But what do we have to do to keep it that way, that it was given to us in that form, or that we created it in that form, and really have a concrete plan to keep that up. And this also goes back to what I've been talking about for the Academy building for a number of years, Mr. Dutton, as you know. So just another plug for that. But thank you, Mr. Simons, for your presentation.
Any other questions from any other counselors? I have a couple, but anyone else? So, Mr. Simons, thank you very much for coming on. I echo what has been said earlier about yourself and your crew, your team, the work that you guys put in. I'll say for the fun part of town, I guess. Probably not a lot of fun supporting it, but it's a lot of fun participating in it. I just have a couple things. I know I've spoken to Mr. Salmonte, Mr. Dutton, they've probably spoken to you. I know back early on in the pandemic, as you brought up with COVID, the governor did mandate golf courses to close down. I would implore, if you haven't, or if you could, revisit any expenses that you incurred during that time. My understanding is their CARES eligible for reimbursement. And as you work on a shoestring budget, so does the town. If we can get any money, and we still have time in 2021 to do it, I would implore to look at every avenue to recoup expenses. And also, I'm assuming you're planning for the upcoming season. We're probably still going to have the need to have social distancing and sanitation requirements for that. So if you can get ahead of it for your personal protection equipment, things like that, we still have a good chunk of change available. And I'd like to get that before it, quote unquote, disappears. So that's just a comment, but I do have a question. So since I've been on the council, and probably longer, I cannot recall that you've had an open position on your board. We've reappointed people, but I can't recall that Parks and Rec has had an open position on your board. What's your secret to retaining the people on the board? Because as you probably know, the vast majority of boards, we either can't keep people on them, or we can't get people to join them. So what are you doing? Share the secret, because we need to know what it is and replicate it.
Well, they won't go away. No, actually, I'll tell you why. Because I say this all the time, and that's why so many people get involved in recreation, whether it's passive, whether it's active. 99% of the time, it's a good thing. Whether your kids are involved or you're involved as coaches or just parents coming to games, 99% of the time, it's a good thing. So people that we have on the board have been there, most of them have been there a long time and have a passion for it. And a few years ago, when one of them had passed away, and somebody said, well, the thing somebody had mentioned to me, oh, he's a baseball guy, or he's a football guy, or he's a soccer guy. And the comment was made that, who cares? They'll find out fast that what we do is for the better of the whole. And so that's the 5 people that are involved care in all parts of recreation. And some have different agendas. Time, get along great. I might not be the most communicative person to them because things have changed a little bit, especially this year, because I don't like going online. I don't like getting, these Zoom calls. I have a hard time getting to work my phone. But anyway, they're good people and they care about it. And some of them are retired now. Some of them are very keen interest.
Great. Well, I appreciate the time. Keep up your good work, and thank you very much.
Okay. People know where I am. If you ever have any questions or call, please do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the town manager report. Mitchell School update. Mr. Dutton.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. I don't have a whole lot to report on the Mitchell School that I haven't already reported. The contractor is mobilizing, and the real work is about to get underway. The OPM is working the numbers now that our bond has been floated and sold with good results. They're working on finalizing the numbers there, as well as the numbers on the construction contract. So as soon as we have all those numbers, I know there's a lot of interest in getting the payment calculator, the tax payment calculator back up online. We will do that as soon as we have all those numbers. We're just waiting on getting those. We are still in good shape as far as I know with the timeline. We're looking at a project completion date of July 2022, which means start of school year in September of 2022. And so that is still on track. The next meeting of the school building committee is February 8th. It's a Zoom meeting. Not exactly sure of the time. It's either 5:30 or 6, I believe, but that is February 8th. You can find that on the town calendar if you'd like to attend. And as I always say, any additional information can be found, all the information from day one can be found at www.bridgewaterschoolproject.com. So that's what I have on the school, but happy to answer a question.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
And just a quick question to follow up on my question to Mr. Simons. You agree with Mr. Simons that the pickleball courts are all set and insulated from the construction of the school, and we're good?
They are. The pickleball courts, if you can envision that area, the pickleball courts will lie on the senior center or the Conan Center side of the berm that separates sort of that gravel lot where the pickleball courts are being built with the school property, the school playing field. The road, as Charlie mentioned, we've accounted for the road that's planned as the exit for the school buses only. And so I think we're in good shape there.
Any other questions? All righty, moving on to COVID-19 update.
Excuse me. COVID-19, we do hover around 70 community cases. The DOC numbers have leveled off, which reflects, our numbers have dropped a little, which does reflect sort of Massachusetts-wide drop in cases and certainly drop in severity. To its credit, BSU students are back, and they have only 8 students in either quarantine or isolation right now. I quite frankly had anticipated that number to be higher based on the fact that everybody was off on their winter break and coming back to campus. BSU does have about 1/3 of the number of people in its dorms than it would normally have, and they don't have the commuters coming in because almost all classes are being held online. So, but regardless, I think I had expected and we had expected a little bit fewer more than the 8. So that's really good news. We have had 2 exposures within town operations, which we're tracking carefully. And as I anticipated last meeting, I think we'll continue to be a quote unquote red community later this week. We do continue to operate on an appointment only basis in the town offices. So we're trying to have as little impact to the community as possible. We did have February 1st is tax payment day, as we all know. And so, so that was a little bit of a challenge for one of our offices that was impacted. So, but regardless, if anybody in the community needs face-to-face access, just call the department, set up an appointment. Our new phone system has been rolled out, so we can get, when the phone rings in our office, the phone will also ring on our laptops wherever we might be. So still can't quite figure out if that's a good thing or bad thing, but it is a thing, and we're just trying to make sure that residents are as well served as possible with the constraints that we're under right now. We did vaccinate our public safety officials under phase 1, public safety officers rather, under phase 1. That was mid-January. We're currently working to try to organize a vaccination clinic for phase 2, first phase, which is folks 75 years and older, for later this month. So we're diligently working on that. Just as a matter of information, so phase 2 includes, starts off with 75 and older, then 65 and older, then teachers, other sick individuals that have comorbidities, and that is scheduled to last mid-February through March. Phase 3, which is everybody else, anybody and everybody, is projected to begin in April, but quite frankly, we are awaiting a lot more DPH guidance and how that will be rolled out in our local community. For those that have gone on to the state website looking for vaccine locations, you'll see the closest ones to us, I believe, are Gillette Stadium. They are advertising the Hannafords in Middleborough, and I believe a location in Halifax. There is nothing in our general area yet. We are lobbying the state to place a location here. And I know the state has been in discussions with BSU, been in discussions with all the state universities about opening up a state vaccination site, through the state university system. We haven't gotten any word that that's going to be the case yet, but I know those discussions have been happening. So that's where we stand right now, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions on COVID-19? Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Mr. Dutton, on the vaccine distribution for the 75 and older folks, have you received any, or the health department received any complaints about them being able to schedule appointments? And how is the town facilitating them troubleshooting and navigating through the state website?
That's actually a very timely question. We have received complaints. We receive, we can receive over 100 calls a day from seniors in Bridgewater who, quite frankly, are confused, quite understandably so, by the process, and also want to know, where to turn because they can't use a computer to be able to log their information. And so we are in the process of setting up a phone bank, I guess, if you will, or an information line through the senior center. We're getting folks properly trained. Well, let me back up. So in phase one, the state used, and I don't remember the name of their system, but it was a specific system to log every single first responder, every single person that was getting the vaccine into a database, which is necessary so that the state can track the second shot. So it's a little bit unlike flu because you have to track people and you have to make sure that they come back within the 27 days to get their second shot. Now that the state has rolled out a different program, which I gather, I haven't seen it, but I gather it's a little more challenging or a little more labor intensive to use. We went up to observe a site in Randolph, I believe it was, and the bottlenecks that they were experiencing were precisely what you're talking about, the registration, the initial registration. So to the extent that we can help people register, we'll obviously need to train our folks in how to give that guidance, but we are in the works with that. So hopefully within the next week, we'll be able to provide some guidance to the seniors that are having a challenge trying to schedule a vaccination.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to FY 2022 budget.
The FY22 budget. So I'll give you, council should have received today, earlier today, the February 1st submission of the town manager's preliminary budget and budget message. Traditionally, this is a process, or this is a submission that is very general, not based on solid numbers, as anybody that's been involved with the budget process knows. By February 1st, we've never had solid figures, revenue figures, or expense figures for that matter to build the budget. So this is designed to give you sort of a broad overview and our best estimate as to where we're going. The budget is designed to meet our service objectives that we set out. We have not made any very substantial changes to our service plan, and so the budget reflects that. Obviously, COVID has impacted 2021, and we are still trying to gauge how that's going to impact 2022. We definitely get conflicting reports. You hear some reports, in fact, there were reports out today that the economy, certainly with the injection of the $900 billion or whatever it was by the federal government in December, is looking to be, we're looking for a growth rate in 2022 of something like 4.5%. That flip side of that is that, as we know, people are out of work. Certainly service industries are closing. Restaurants and bars, for instance, have seen a lot of closures statewide, nationwide. So we are still trying to really wrap our hands around that, and hopefully we'll have a little more clarity on what the federal government's planning, what the state government finalizes before April 1st, or at least we'll have an idea of where the state budget is going by April 1st when I submit the balanced budget. So I can highlight a few of the budget assumptions that we're making. We do know that we will have new growth of at least $800,000, which is about 1.7% of our FY21 levy limit. And we are possibly going to see a little more than that, but we know we'll have at least $800,000 in new growth. That's good news, certainly in a time of COVID. We've estimated local receipts. We reduced local receipts last year in anticipation of a shrinking economy, and we have now boosted those local receipts back up to reflect the historical trends of over the last 5 years. So moving sort of post-COVID. We assume a normal ambulance transfer based upon, again, a 5-year look back. The annual revenues for the ambulance in FY 2020 were 2.1 million. We are projecting that by the end of this year, 2021, that'll be 2.3 million. And we are looking for a transfer of about $1.9 million out of the ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation fund. So that's in keeping with years past. We are looking to level fund our indirect costs. We're not going to increase those indirect costs. So for those that don't know, indirect costs are what we charge the enterprise funds for items related for general fund expenses specific to those enterprise funds. So indirects will remain the same for 2022. Generally budget goals, and my conversation with the FinCom and Budget and Finance a little while ago, our budget goals are largely based on our internal goals, and certainly goals from last year are continuing. But this year we want to maintain town services during the balance of the pandemic and avoid the use of the town's stabilization fund. Again, support and promote economic activity as best as we can, increase funding in specific areas where we see sizable service gaps, including the DPW and town buildings, and then preserve and improve town infrastructure. So those are very generally our overarching goals for 2022. In terms of specific line items in a budget, I can tell you education obviously is a yearly concern. Oftentimes the assessment is something larger than we can afford, and so we have a lot of discussions with the school superintendent as well as the school business manager about whether or not we can get to a specific number. And those conversations obviously will be ongoing and much more intense this year as well. So we do know that our assessment to Norfolk Aggie, we won't have an assessment for Norfolk Aggie because they are down to 0 students from Bridgewater. Otherwise, the other educational budgets for the tech schools are just about, we're anticipating that they'll be just about the same. Certainly, as I mentioned, DPW, we are looking for a DPW director and a facilities director. Only portions of those expenses will be allocated to the general fund because we do an allocation based upon oversight of the enterprise funds, and certainly facilities is the same thing. We do an allocation essentially based upon a square footage and time allocation of what we think specific buildings will need. So that will be part of the budget. We're looking at a general employee benefit increase of around 5.75% for the upcoming year. So we're seeing about a 7.25% increase in retirement assessment. And we are seeing some medical insurance increases all lumped in together of about 4.1%. We're anticipating an increase in other smaller insurances as well. So all said and done, we're looking at a budget right now with a deficit of about $845,000, and between now and April, obviously, that's our objective is to work that down to a balanced budget, because that's what we have to do. I will point out, though, I started out by talking a little bit about the projected revenues and how they're a little slightly different than what we were anticipating. We right now are not anticipating, even though we were anticipating about 6 months ago, having to tap stabilization for our 2022 budget. We don't right now see a scenario that would, under our guidelines, that would allow us to tap stabilization. So right now we are not proposing that, and we're going to try to stick with that proposition. So obviously that's a very high level, very quick overview, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions or speak to specific numbers if anybody wants that.
So, Mr. Dutton, and I appreciate you doing that. So I think one of the things that I just like to highlight per se, and this has been brought up by you and others as well, and this is, primarily for the people that are watching either, in this room or on Facebook, whatever the case may be. When it comes to the assessment from the district, our evaluation process is solely based on what we feel we can financially afford for that assessment. We do not take into consideration any type of the funding proposals, expansion, reduction. We look at it purely as what the district says they need from us and what we can afford. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely accurate.
Okay, thank you.
So the district, I think that I was going to say the important piece of information there is that the district, through its school board, the superintendent, obviously the business manager involved in formulating their budgets, they make the decisions about how the money is spent. So they run, admittedly, they are under some budget pressures this year. We know that. But when we all get to the final number and the school board votes that as the assessment and the town votes that as the budget, that money goes to the district. We don't require, we don't stipulate, we can't stipulate where that specifically where that money goes. That's the district. That's the district's decision to make and discussion to have.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher, did you have a question?
I have a couple of questions. Just on the school budget, for example, the 30,319,000, what percent of an increase is that? Just that number alone?
I apologize. I'd have to go back and look at the specific percentage, but I believe that we were using a 2.7, 2.8% increase on that line.
Okay. And the other question I have, and I don't expect you to be able to answer this, so I'll send you an email tomorrow, but we all got from the finance department December 31, 2020 financial report through 6 months through the fiscal year. The question I have is on the prior levy limit on your proposal tonight. It has 46,307,000. But on the report we got from the finance director, it says real estate tax for FY21 is 46,736. I would think that would be our base for the property prior levy limit. I'm not sure. I just see two different numbers. And then in the revenue that we're using for fiscal 21, he has a personal property tax of 1.3 million, and we've received roughly about half of that in. What is that? And why wouldn't we get an amount for fiscal 22 as well? I don't know if those questions, if the levy limit one is something you can answer, but.
Those are particular enough. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
I would have to go back and look at those.
I'll send something out tomorrow then.
Okay.
I don't think you missed anything. I'm just wondering what that 1.3 million is for fiscal 21 on personal property tax in the report we got from the town account from the.
Right. No, we can, if you send that along, that's one that I'm sure we can answer pretty quick.
And prior to the council meeting, we had a joint meeting with the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and the town manager was in that. We did go over these numbers briefly, but we're going to continue our discussions with a joint meeting with the Finance Committee subcommittee on their budget. over the next several weeks. So this is just the starting point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep. Any other questions? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Dutton, you talked about new growth of $800,000 or so, is that right?
Correct.
How much of that is related to Elm Street?
That's a great question. I'm not sure specifically how much is related to Elm Street. I can find out. I can tell you that that is net of the DIF, which is being used to
Okay,
offset the
so if
cost
there
of
was
Elm
anything,
Street.
so the 800,000 already calculates what needs to go into Elm Street to pay back the road, et cetera.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's great. So that's 1.7%, and we get 2.5% increase in the levy limit by law, right? So that gets me to 4.2% increase in revenue. Why aren't we flush with cash? 4.2% increase in revenue is huge.
Well, 2.5% increase and then a 1.7% increase on a smaller amount doesn't necessarily equate.
Okay, so the 1.7% increase is over last year.
Over the, it's the percentage that new growth is of last year's budget.
New growth.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
well, I just wanted to make that clear to folks. Because when I did the math in my head, that's where I was going. So it's a very small number because, as Mr. Gallagher pointed out, we've got 40+ million in levy limit to go to. So it's a very small number. So I'd appreciate if you could get this up on the website so that other folks could look at it and understand it and dissect it. And the last question I have, which is probably not for you, it's probably for the school superintendent, but in the information that Mr. Salmonte sent to us this afternoon, we certainly saw that special education keeps taking a bigger and bigger increase every year in the BR school budget, yet the state doesn't fund that even though it's mandated. So that would be one place where the school district is going to come looking to us to say, well, we have to fund this line item, and it's going up at 7%, I believe the number I saw was, might be more than that. And the state doesn't fully fund it, even though they mandate it, so we have to pay it. And so that might be one reason why the school district's assessment toward the town outpaces general revenue, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so I appreciate the time, and thank you, Mr. President.
Yep. Any other questions?
Mr. President, if I could.
Mr. Rushton?
So through you, just wanted to add one comment. I know that we just talked about these projections and revenue projections. I did want to mention, in case it was missed and it's occurred after these were done, but the university has made a definite decision to return students in full in the fall. So that means occupancy rates anywhere from 90 to 100%, as well as having commuters back, traveling back and forth to school. So I know you talked about a 5-year average, just wasn't sure what kind of impact that would have as we start to put those final numbers together. Maybe they're a little bit low, and there's a little financial boom for us on that side with the university back in the picture.
That's actually a great point. Though, when I talk about the 5-year averages, we do, this year, previously I've said, we exclude things that are just sort of, crazy one-time revenues that or if we're looking at a 5-year average on expenses, we take out crazy one-time expenses so that we can sort of even out and we can see a trend. With 2022 or 2021 rather being such a crazy year, it wouldn't surprise me if the finance director is making, kind of segregating 2021 into its separate bucket and using a 5-year, average over the previous, 15 to 20 to come up with some trends. So But that's a point well taken, and I'll double check to see how our 5-year averages are being calculated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, reach out to Mr. Dutton if you have anything that you want him to cover on our next meeting, not next week, but our next meeting. Do not have any discussions. Any committee reports? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to legislation for action. Order O FY 21-027 transfer order employee contractual buyout. At their meeting held on January 12, 2021, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. The Finance Committee voted unanimously on January 25th, 2021 to recommend approval of this measure. The measure may be finally considered this evening. Mr. Dutton, anything to add?
I have nothing to add. This is a fairly routine when we have a fairly routine order when we have employees retire. Some bargaining unit employees do have sick time buyback, and that's a liability to the town, and we are obligated to pay that upon retirement. So that's what you see here.
Motion to approve.
Have a
Second.
motion?
Second.
Second. Mr. Fitzgibbons, any questions?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Gallagher,
Nope.
any other counselors? This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George.
Feeling you get one.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay. Moving on to order O FY 21-028 acceptance of private donation. At their meeting held on January 12, 2021, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. The Finance Committee voted unanimously on January 25th, 2021 to recommend approval of this measure. The measure may be finally considered this evening. Excuse me, Mr. Dutton, anything to add?
Nothing to add except for a very generous donation from an anonymous donor. So that is certainly appreciated.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is a motion?
Second.
Second. Mr. Fitzgibbons, any questions?
No, just a thank you to the anonymous donor. We always appreciate this.
Mr. Souza?
No, just another thank you.
Any other counselors with questions? Excuse me. This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
I'm sorry, yes.
thank you. Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Give me 1 second. Sorry about that, losing my voice. All right, order O FY 21-029, place an advisory question on the April 24th, 2021 town election ballot. At their meeting held on January 25th, 2021, the Rules and Procedures Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure with proposed amendments. Per section, excuse me, 18 of the Council on Rules Procedures, 14 days has elapsed. Therefore, this measure may be finally considered pending the adoption of any proposed amendments. Mr. Wood, I'll turn to you since you're the sponsor.
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Mr. Wood, any discussion?
Does someone want to make a motion to amend?
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to amend. Thank you. Is there a motion to amend? I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Chase, any questions?
No.
So I'll explain, since I'm on the rules and procedures, exactly the methodology of why we did the amendment. And also Mr. Souza, Mr. Columbotus, excuse me, keep me honest here. And again, folks, I'm going to apologize. Don't know why I'm losing my voice, but in our discussions, we basically came to the consensus that if this does go forward as a non-binding advisory question, it should be a question, does the town support it within Bridgewater, and not have it basically catered to two existing companies that are already in Bridgewater. There's really, even if this were to go forward, there's many more steps to be involved in regards to the zoning aspect. But if the question is going to be, does Bridgewater want to move forward with this? We felt that the right thing to do was to say in Bridgewater, not for a specific location or specific companies. Any other questions on the amendment? Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment. I'm not sure whether I'm in favor of the whole thing or not yet, but just reading retail sale of recreational marijuana in Bridgewater, I'd like to add limited to no more than 2 shops. So that's my amendment.
Mr. Rollins. Well,
Yes.
I take that back. This is a non-binding question. So there's really, we don't have to take into consideration any specific law per se, right? That would keep us from keeping it to 2?
No, you can frame it however you want. That's up to you guys to decide what opinion you really want, obviously, from the public at large.
So that's my motion to
Okay.
amend the amendment.
All right. So there's a motion to amend the amendment to add so marijuana, no more than 2 in Bridgewater?
Retail sale of recreational marijuana limited to no more than 2 facilities in the town or something like that.
Limited to no more than, well, 2, I guess 2 licenses. Is that more accurate, Mr. Rollins?
That's more accurate if that's what you guys are.
Yes, that's what I intend. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Rollins.
Yep. Okay. So
I'll second that.
you'll second it? Okay.
Sure.
Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment?
And I made the motion, so I think. I
Yep,
have
go
the
ahead,
floor.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yeah, if this passes and it goes to a vote of the town, which is all that this is gonna do, I don't want people to think that there's gonna be a pot shop on every corner, which is kind of the implication that I'm seeing in the way it's written. No offense to the folks who wrote it, but Mr. Wood seemed to limit it to 2 medical spots. So I don't care if they're limited to the 2 medical spots or not. Frankly, I don't want to see marijuana sold in the town. But if we go for an advisory opinion, then let's make sure people know we're not asking to open up everywhere. That's my only rationale.
Okay, Mr. Wood?
Actually, that's a great rationale. I'll support that.
Okay, Mr. Gallagher, did you have a question
Yeah, a comment.
or a comment? Question, comment?
So Mr. President, I mean, and to the amendment, and I'll stick to the amendment, I believe the amendment has unintended consequences, simply because the question, if it goes to the voters, is a non-binding question. No matter how it's written, no matter how it's worded, it comes back to us and we can do whatever we want with it. However, I think there'll be some weight given to the fact that whether it passes or fails, well, they did want or didn't want two locations, or the original proposal was to have it just for the medical facility. So I think, again, as has been said by our speakers at the beginning of the meeting and was said at our last meeting, we're going to spend probably 15, 20 minutes, if not longer, talking about this issue. We've already got 2 amendments. As has been discussed before, it would have been nice if we did a lot of research to justify the initial claim of the change in public view, or whether it should go just to the medical facilities or just have the two facilities. So I think 2 licenses in town. So I think we're heading in a direction where how it's presented to the voters could have unintended consequences.
Anyone else? Mr. Souza.
Yes. The original discussion way back when on whether we should have marijuana in Bridgewater, I was one of the sponsors of the ordinance that said no. And that formed a big organization, people who had multiple meetings discussing the pros and the cons, because it was an open meeting by this private group of citizens, and it came out to they didn't want it. Now, I like the idea of the taxes, but I don't think my mind has really been changed from original as to we should not have it. I've got a lot of calls recently pertaining to it. They knew where I was on the subcommittee. And some of them reminded me, in fact, that I was one of the people who put that ordinance in and that I had attended all their meetings and supported it. So I did talk to several people on the council, and, you know, I kind of said to some that, you know, I'm seriously thinking of giving the people the opportunity to go right ahead and make their decision. And then I said to others, you know, maybe I should just stick to my original guns and say anything to do with it, as far as I'm concerned, came from the past. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the issue before us is just whether the question should be put before the voters as to their preference, whether adult use marijuana should be available for sale in the town. And I don't know the answer as to whether public sentiment has changed or not. That's the point of the referendum, of the advisory opinion that we're looking for in this order. It may or may not have, but it seems to me that we're doing a disservice if we prejudge it and assume on the basis of limited input that that in fact public sentiment has not changed. We don't know that. It's begging the question to assume in advance that you know, the public opinion on this matter has not changed. So I frankly don't see how the council can be faulted for putting a referendum question, a non-binding referendum question, before the voters on an important issue. It frankly would be more helpful for the council in general if we had other opportunities to put questions like this before the voting public in order to inform our actions as a council. We don't have those opportunities, but we do have an election, a town election coming up. And so the infrastructure will be in place on that one day for this kind of a referendum to be conducted as a poll, just to find out, has opinion on this changed?
Mr. Chase, I apologize. At this stage, we're just discussing the amendment to the amendment.
That's fine. And I'm perfectly in favor of the amendment to the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Rushton, you have your hand up. This is in regards to the amendment to the amendment.
Mr. President, I'm going to actually defer till we get back to the actual proposal in front of us.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Wood?
Thank you. Although I seconded the motion, I'm actually going to be against it. I think that, as several have said, that the wider question is probably the better question. And putting a number down is really for a future action if that action is called upon. This is more a general question for the public. And it's just a question. I'll remind everybody, it's just a question. And I'll get to that in a minute. So I'll probably vote against the amendment, but I thank Mr. Fitzgibbons for his input.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so we're voting on the amendment to the amendment. This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
No.
Mrs. Loesch,
No.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
No.
Mr. George,
No.
Mr. Rushton,
No.
Mr. Souza,
No.
Mr. Columbotus,
No.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
2 in favor, 7 against.
Okay, now we're back to discussion on the order as originally amended. Any discussion?
We're on the amended. We're on the amendment language at this point.
Correct. That's what I said. The order as amended.
Discussion on the amendment.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
All right. All right. So we got that
If I
all
may.
right. As any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Thank you. So I greatly appreciate the work of the committee, including Frank and Sean and Peter. There was if you watched that meeting, there was a number of discussions about, changing the question into a more general question. And I'm in favor of the general question. I went through several revisions when I was putting this together, talking to a lot of different people. And it seemed like at the time that, just identifying the two, whether it would switch over the dispensaries or not was maybe the best approach. But I think after watching the meeting with Frank's comments during the meeting where he supported the general question, and the general approach is probably the best one. I need to just remind everybody, this is just a question. It doesn't, and the question with the amendment doesn't change the ban. So the amendment that we're talking about doesn't change the ban. The town council retains full control over the ban and any future decisions to modify it. So this is just a question, and I think that the amended form is probably the best way. So I'll be supporting the amendment.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we are voting on the amendment. This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
No.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
No.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
No.
Mr. Gallagher,
No.
6 in favor. Nope, sorry. 5 in favor, 4 against.
Okay, now we're moving on to approving the order as amended. I'll entertain a motion. Is there a discussion? Mr. Gallagher, I see your hand up.
On the main motion, they already have a first and second discussion, right?
Yep, discussion. I apologize. Yes.
Just quickly, Mr. President, I mean, we heard from the Councilor Chase a few minutes ago that, this should be put to the voters and that they need the answer or something to that effect and all that, and that this is what people want to know. Well, I haven't, as one counselor, and I'm going to wager that I don't think many counselors, maybe 1 or 2, I don't know. I don't even think that many. I haven't received one email or one phone call or one letter in the mail from anybody asking me to put this on the ballot. We want to have a voice. We want to have this question asked again. Not one. I haven't received anything from anybody. And I'm out there in the public. I'm at the stores. I'm at the gym. I'm in the community. No one's asked me that question. But you know what they're asking me? They're asking me, and I'm getting emails, I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting questions on the street about our town roads. I'm getting questions about our park systems. I'm getting questions about vaccine distribution for our seniors in phase 2. And we're all getting questions and comments about making sure the school district funds a diversity, equity, inclusion position at the high school. Those are the questions that I'm hearing out there in public, not about where's the pot shop in Bridgewater. So we've had this discussion before. I think that this discussion and this question certainly will come before the council at some point based on information we get if the federal government takes action, or we have more information relative to the initial the initial language regarding is the public appetite, public sentiment changes on this issue. So we've already spent almost 20 minutes on this question. I'll vote no, because I think there are other pressing issues that we could have conversations about here at the council meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you. You know, earlier it was said in comments that the town voted in 2016 not to have pot shops in town, but that mischaracterizes the vote in 2016. It wasn't a vote about shops in Bridgewater at all. It was a general vote, and recreational legalization has happened. Your neighbors can grow pot in their backyard, and you can sit on your patio and watch the sunset while enjoying the recreational marijuana. That doesn't change. Also, that doesn't change is access for teenagers. It never was legal for teenagers to have it. It's not legal, I don't believe, for any BSU residents to have it on campus. You can't smoke it on the common. None of that changes. We're asking a question just to survey the population. Ed Ivaldi said it best in his comments when he said, we need to understand the will of the people. And there's no other way to understand the will of the people unless you put a question out there and they can vote on it at the ballot box. The basis for, has things changed in 4 or 5 years is easy to find. Last week, the Boston Globe reported 67% of Americans back recreational legalization. So we've already in the state passed it, and communities are already building shops. 46 communities now, according to Mass Life, have at least one shop. And the comptroller for the state reported that in 2020, the local taxes, just the local taxes raised at the local level was $14.39 million. When you break that out about average per community, that tax income brings tax income of $312,000 to these communities, sometimes more, sometimes less. But when we talk about diversity and inclusion over at the high school, or we talk about park stewards here in town, or we talk about other resources we need, there's tax dollars out there. So right now, a majority of Americans have access, and we don't dispute that. So over the course of 5 years or so, the point is that more people are accepting of the product. And there's, even on our own budget, we see revenue in the town manager's letter today, revenue from cannabis of $225,000. That $225,000 is going to be split evenly for town and school. And we're already seeing that as host agreements of the medical. And so this question is simply to find out if Bridgewater is aligned with the 67% of Americans that back recreational marijuana or not. And again, it's just a question. It doesn't remove the ban, and it leaves the town council in full control over the ban and any future decisions modify it. We have an opportunity to put it out there effectively for free to find out what the temperature of the town is. And I hope that we can get support here and just move along. Then we don't have to discuss it at all again. Thank you.
Mr. Rushton, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I've patiently waited to just give my brief comments, and to the council, you all know at the last meeting, the information that I provided in my time on the marijuana ad hoc committee and all of the information that was brought back to the town to make a decision. To Councilor Gallagher's point, I did want to point out today that, you know, I feel that my decision is both a moral one and one that represents the residents of Bridgewater, in the fact that I have yet to receive a single email, phone call, or conversation from anybody regarding this issue that's in favor of it. I think when Councilor Wood talks about majority have access, well, that's true. Why do we need to open up the range to make it even easier? If access to marijuana in Bridgewater is that easy, why do we need to make it even easier? The $225,000, as he pointed out, that's a revenue projection for 22. Tell me what that actually pays for. We could barely get a director of diversity, equity, inclusion at the high school with paid benefits for that amount of money. So I asked my fellow councilors, what exactly are we getting out of that? And then lastly, I'll just remind everybody, if you're watching the Cannabis Control Commission and what's happening, again, to Council Wood and Gallagher's point, when you look at the federal level and deregulation under the current administration, the Cannabis Control Commission is going to be doing away with these local host agreements. They won't exist. So the revenue that we're trading off today in order to allow that to come in the town might not be there in 2 or 3 years. And then I'll ask you if it was worth it. So with that being said, I will be voting no yet again on this particular resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Wood.
Can I just add? Yeah, I agree with Mr. Rushton that the host agreements will go away, but the 3% tax won't. And so we may lose that 225, which does pay for resources, but we'll be offsetting it with another 300,000. In the meantime, we'll be pulling in maybe a couple 100,000 above and beyond what we're doing today, if of course the council takes action. And this question isn't about taking action against the ban. This question is about simply letting the voters have a voice and telling us yes or no, do they support allowing shops, which is not the 2016 question. So now we're asking directly, are you in favor of this or not? If the answer is no, then clearly they're not. If the answer is yes, then we have another discussion.
Any other comments? Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Not so much a comment as a question to the 3 Rules and Procedures Committee folks, which I believe is Mr. George Columbotus and Souza. I may be wrong. But you're recommending this to us 3-0, and we did not have subcommittee reports. So if y'all would like to tell us why you're recommending it to us that we should approve, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I thought at the very beginning I did have that discussion in regards to our discussion. Mr. Columbotus and Mr. Souza, would you like to also chime in on it?
My opinion was that I don't see any harm in gaining information. It doesn't bind us. I don't think anyone should feel obligated to pursue it if there's a favorable referendum result. I think information cannot hurt us, and that the more information, the better. That's all.
Thank you.
Anything to add, Mr. Souza?
Yeah, Mr. President, we see too often in town where things come up, they seem to go away, and then action is taken. And very little people, very small amount of individuals even have that opportunity to come in and really voice their opinion. And, you know, some of them say to me, well, you know, they can zoom in. We've already heard how many people in town, not an exact number, are unable to register for the vaccine because they don't even have computers. So if they don't have computers, or they don't know how to use a computer in their home, how are they to keep up with everything that's going on? Okay, so, at first I thought, well, maybe this would be a way to have them give an opinion. But then I look back today, as somebody reminded me, that this coming election is going to be a normal town election, and the percentage of the voters is always very low. So is that a true representation of the town? You decide.
Anything else? So,
No, Mr. President, sorry. I'd just like to thank Mr. Columbotus and Mr. Souza for explaining. So they answered my question. I appreciate that.
okay. I'm just getting, this is my personal comment. Back when the recreational zoning came up, I was the sole voice that said that we should have put that question in front of the people to vote. We did not go in that direction, and I still think it was the wrong move for us. It should have been a townwide vote. So in this particular case, I have no idea how this question's going to go if it does go forward. But again, something at this level with this impact to the town does deserve, the town people deserve the right to vote either yay or nay. And if this does go forward, and if somehow it does pass and there's talk about actually zoning for recreational marijuana, I will still support the fact that the council should put it in front of the voters. We should not be taking the responsibility for that, which my understanding is we have the ability to do. All right, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
No.
oops, Mrs. Loesch,
No.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
No.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
No, no.
5 in favor, 4 against.
Okay, moving on to order. Oh, excuse me one sec. My apologies. We do not have any old business. Moving on to new business. Order O FY 21-030, acceptance of non-recurring revenue to capital. I'll entertain a motion to actually, Mr. Dutton, anything to add to this?
Nothing to add, Mr. President?
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Souza,
Nothing says.
any other questions? This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch, Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, order O FY 21-031, establish town manager goals. That's supported by me. Just a quick explanation. We did have a brief discussion on this in rules and procedures and felt that it needed to be referred to strategic planning to finalize the goals, plus the expectation is, I think we have asked a few times that counselors send their recommended goals and objectives, and the rules and strategic planning should be finalizing that. So hence, this is the reason for the order to refer it to strategic planning. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Fitzgibbons, any questions?
None, thank you.
Mr. Souza,
No, sir.
any other counselors? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Moving on to citizens' comments. Again, if I remind people, please keep it to 3 minutes. Please state your name and your street for the record. Is there anyone who would like to speak for citizens' comments? All right, I see Jay Smith.
Yep, Mr. George, can you hear me?
I can.
Sure. It's Jennifer Smith, Boxwood Lane again. I just can't tell you how absolutely frustrated I am with hearing the comments that just went on tonight. Mr. Wood, you want to survey the people? Are you kidding me? You've been peddling for these companies for years and ignoring the residents' wishes. And Mr. Chase, you say, how can the council be faulted for surveying the public? You're new, so I just want to remind you what happened last time. One of these so-called innocent companies hired a company, employed people to sway the votes of at least 4 council members to vote against the ban last time. You can look it up, it's easily Googled, and if you need the information, you can definitely contact me. They paid employees to parade around town trying to get residents who would vocally oppose a ban. Not to mention these companies actually tried to entice people to a meeting with a free dinner. And then Mr. Columbotus, you can't see the harm. They're paying people to survey to get out there and vote, and they'll do it again. I just cannot believe that we are going through this again. I know our people are frustrated with this, and you wonder why people don't want to volunteer. Their voice isn't heard. They don't ever feel heard. It's just so frustrating. You know, we feel like we're on the right side of this. We feel it's morally wrong that you're putting, it's like a David and Goliath. Like they're going to push, they got 2 months now to go out and campaign, pay employees to parade around town. Well, the residents are going to pay for this. It's just awful. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mrs. Hanson, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street. I just want to express my disappointment on the vote. It was a close vote, but I am disappointed. I applaud those that were in favor of not allowing it on the ballot for the reasons like Mr. Gallagher had said and Mr. Rushton. There hasn't been any, if there isn't anybody contacting the town council and saying that this town is suffering because we don't have marijuana retail shops in town, then how can Mr. Wood or others say that people want it? And I just don't understand the thought process or the reason why, Mr. Wood, you feel the need to keep pushing this and bringing it up. No one's saying this town is suffering because we don't have retail shops in town. We're suffering with other things that are more important. I'm just disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Ms. Robinson, excuse me.
Hi there. Just wanted to comment to the specific discussions around using this opportunity on
Ms. Robinson, just your
Yeah.
street, please. Just your street, please.
Holly Lane.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to address some of the earlier conversation around using this as a sort of methodology. I am wholly supportive of getting community input and buy-in. And it sounds like that homework wasn't actually done by this group. For those of you who voted to have this be put on the ballot, there are so many ways you can engage with your constituents. You can have conversations, you can return emails, counselors, for those that have been contacted by people and don't respond. You can have multiple forums. You know, Bill, you've actually had some good efforts trying to have those conversations online. And I have to be honest, even in those efforts, I have not seen the community support for what you proposed either. So there are other methodologies. You have people in the community who have marketing and communications backgrounds, and you could get advice from them in terms of how to reach your constituents. I actually think, Mr. Susie, you made a really great point. It'll be interesting to see how many people will turn out for this. Hopefully it's statistically helpful, but I would just really urge you to find other avenues to really get real feedback from your constituents. And then I actually really like this point around, how should I put it? I'm sorry, we've belabored the topic enough. I just want to urge you to really engage with the community in different ways before you actually put something on a ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? And I don't see anyone, do you?
See anyone offhand, but let me just scroll through one more time. No, I don't see anyone.
Okay, going to council comments. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for, again, running a very well-run meeting over this Zoom stuff, which I can't believe how hard it must be to do that and watch everybody, make sure you're getting all the input. I appreciate what you're doing for us. Yeah, we had a few 5-4 votes tonight. I don't think that the people who voted one way or the other, for or against, I think I was on the losing end of a 7-2 vote. That you guys are bad or anything like that. It just means we have different opinions. We're going to have a question on the ballot for the voters of Bridgewater, and let them decide. If all of the evidence is so clear, which I believe it to be, I would hope, just as they did in 2016, they'll vote no again. But if they want to vote yes, then the future town council can look at that and decide what, if any, weight to give to it. That's up to them. So thank you very much, and have a good night.
Mr. Columbotus.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Mr. Souza.
I would like to see every council member spend 27 minutes looking into why we do not have a large influx of businesses coming to town, and why it seems like our boards and committees and our rules make it very difficult for them to come into town. And this is why we're talking about needing taxes from that source. Take some time, 28 minutes, I believe it was, 27 minutes we discussed this. Thank you.
I was timing that.
Mr. Rushton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hopefully I'll be just brief with 2 comments. First, I just want to do a shout out to Emily Williams, the Director of the Council on Aging, and Kathy. I attended some dementia training this week. It was really fantastic and good information. They're providing that free of service during the day, so reach out to Kathy Hayes or Emily Williams. It's really a great resource that we have right here in town. So I thought it was excellent training. Just wanted to share that. Number 2 is just a brief statement about earlier tonight, discussions about the budget and the Budget and Finance Committee, and looking at, particularly the school's budget. And so I would encourage everyone to go to the school district's website and look at the superintendent's proposed budget and what that impact is going to be on the town of Bridgewater and Rainham. And I would encourage people, and I hope that we can get together at some point and invite state representatives in to understand what they're doing at a state level to get us the necessary funding we need to support our schools and to be our school district. And if not, find out strategies where we can work with them in order to get the necessary funding. We can't support it as a town, but I think if we get enough voices at the State House, we could certainly get appropriations like in transportation and other sort of line items that would help the town of Bridgewater support their budget. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. I don't know if everybody can see this or not. This is 10 years old, 11 years old. It's it was a no when we had the budget override. So I was in the gym that day when at open meeting, the budget was changed and we had to find emergency funds, and $2.5 million shifted from one line to the other. And at that point I said that should never happen. And so ever since that day, you know, my approach has always been, how do we make Bridgewater more financially stable? How do we keep improving our resources? How do we keep expanding the things that were drastically cut in 2008 in terms of, you know, police support, fire support, school support? And I do support the schools, and I do listen to all the stories of everything that's needed. You know, when we were talking about psychologists and counselors last year, and now the diversity position, I listen to the town needs. You know, when we talk about Parks and Rec and some projects there, and you know, trail cutting in our various parks and things like that. And all these activities take money. So when you ask, you know, what drives me, a lot of the times it's driven by finding new sources of revenue. And in the question tonight, it's you know, I don't know what'll happen. It's hard to predict the future like that. But I do know that watching the news and watching the media and watching national events, you know, is critical that the voters have a voice. We saw that recently back in November. And it's critical that, you know, we not only listen to the people that are shouting in our ear, but listen to the people that aren't. And I agree with a lot of the speakers. The stories are tragic when you're talking about abuse, you know, abuse of alcohol or abuse of opioids or abuse of other drugs. The stories are all tragic, and often they're you know, the most tragic ones involve teenagers and that sort of thing. But I also know that, you know, we can tax directly five forms of taxes. Real estate's obvious. Personal property tax is what happens within those businesses. So when you have a high-end business, like we might see on Fruit Street for the warehouse or the new warehouse or some of the other detailed and technical shops, personal property tax impacts. We can do meals, we can tax hotel, and we can tax marijuana. And that's it. So our revenue source is pretty limited. So I'm always driven by that concept. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in November. I like, you know, Peter's comments that it poses no harm. And so we'll see what happens in the future. Besides that, you know, great job by the town keeping the snow down to a minimum this storm. You know, they predicted 14 inches and we came out with just slush. So awesome job there, Mr. Dutton. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep. Mr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll say thank you to everyone who participated in the discussion tonight and 2 weeks ago as well, and to those who have communicated their desires to members of the council. I'd like to point out that interestingly, I don't know how to account for this, but quite interestingly, I have received opinions on both sides of the coin on the question of whether this order should be advanced to the ballot. Maybe I'm the only one, but I have, as a matter of fact, received input on both sides of the issue. Just more generally, you know, I think that we have to bear in mind that use does not in and of itself constitute abuse or misuse. In fact, under very strict requirements, marijuana is legal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this council, a previous council actually, 4 years ago, devoted a great deal of time and attention to the matter. And subsequently, our zoning statute was amended, and I think very wisely so, to limit the impact that marijuana in the town would have. Now, I have no idea how the vote at the town election will come out, who will prevail on that. And certainly, I expect probably both sides will organize support for their opinion and try to advance their cause. It's not, I believe, only the commercial interests in town engaging in marijuana commerce who will do so. But I suspect that many of the voters who attended and addressed the council this evening will also mobilize in order to promote their view. And I think that that's good. It's the kind of civic engagement that we should have. And the decision will be made at the ballot. And beyond that, we don't know. But we certainly know that on the basis of what's going to be concluded at the ballot alone, nothing is going to change, except that we're going to have an informed opinion going forward based on what voters have actually said. Thank you.
Mrs. Loesch.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank Karen Acher, I think her name is, that we appointed to the Disabilities Commission tonight. We got a 7-page resume here. She's a very impressive individual, and I wish her well on the Disabilities Commission. And also thank Mike Levy for continuing to want to serve on his committee and his continued service the Levy family has here in Bridgewater. I want to thank the residents of the town that zoomed into our meeting tonight, that spoke out in favor or opposed of all the issues that we talked about tonight, particularly the non-binding question. It was a respectful discussion. It's the way it should be. And I want to thank the residents for voicing their concerns tonight. It's always very helpful. I also want to thank those that have reached out to me through email and other conversations regarding the diversity, equity, and inclusion position that is needed at the high school in the district. I've received at least 7 or 8 emails on that. We talked about it earlier tonight, and we talked about it at the Budget and Finance Committee. And hopefully we can do what we can to support the school budget this year, so that position can be funded. That is it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I just want to echo a couple things. One, I want to appreciate everyone coming out. This is obviously for the recreational, it's a very impassioned discussion across the board. I listened to everyone, try to make informed decisions as best I can, but I've said it, I'm going to say it again, and then depending on how it goes, again, with that advisory question, I don't know. I don't have a clue. But in this particular case, I'm a firm believer that the town should be voting, should have voted, and should be voting regardless of you support it or not. When we talked about this charter back 12 years ago, one of the things that I supported was the fact that if the council in its decision felt that they wanted to get the voters to vote on something that was in their purview to vote on, that you had the opportunity to do it. And if it goes in that direction, if there's anything after this, which again, I don't know, as I said, I will be the proponent of it, needs to go in front of the voters. But I think I would challenge everyone listening, watching, to educate yourself, take all the resources, make an informed decision, and then that would be, I'll say, the will of the people who vote to either go forward or not go forward. So we will have to see. We do not have executive session. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood. Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Want to have a good night.
Two.
Good night.